and welcome into DawgNation at Large. I'm Kaylee Mansell with DawgNation insider Connor Riley. This was one of those weeks where I just felt like there was so much going on that it was kind of hard to decide what I wanted to open with. But I've decided on this. You're not an Atlanta sports fan, so you don't understand the pain of what it's like to root for Atlanta professional sports teams. And as of this week, I think that I've been rooting for the wrong team all along. I attended my first Atlanta United soccer game on Sunday, and now it's my current fixation. I'm so obsessed. Soccer fans are a whole different breed. Like the dopamine rush that you get when they score a goal. Like I think I've just had it wrong this entire time.
Oh, well, Kaylee, if Atlanta United, who's not having a great year,
No.
has gotten you interested in soccer, let me tell you about the English Premier League. Every single week, it does not get better than this. Obviously, we've got the World Cup coming next year. English Premier League is a lot of fun. Champions League soccer is a lot of fun. I'm glad you finally embraced soccer and are on the right side of history with this now. It's a ton of fun.
Yeah, like up until a week ago, the extent of my soccer knowledge was Ted Lasso. And it was just kind of one of those things where I got invited to go and I had the best time. And I would just like to add that since the two games that I have been in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, Atlanta United has been undefeated. They've won both of those games. And I actually brought my best friend with me last night because she played soccer. So that way she could explain all the rules to me. And so if that just shows you how invested I'm getting into this, I don't know what will.
Yeah, the last soccer game I went to was a German Bundesliga game between Schalke 04, who has now been relegated, and Bayern Leverkusen. And like Americans, great. I've been to Atlanta United games. I've had a ton of fun. But overseas, it is a different level. And in some regards, and I know this might be sacrilege to say on this show, there are some aspects where it actually trumps college football.
I will not speak on that. I will let everybody come after you for that. If you have not attended an Atlanta United soccer game or just like a soccer game in general, now based on experience, I would encourage you to go. But here's the thing: this is DawgNation at Large. We don't talk about soccer. We talk about football. So why don't we get into it?
It's the show for the new breed of Georgia Bulldog fan. This is DawgNation at Large with DawgNation insiders Connor Riley and Kaylee Mansell.
Last thing, I will say one last thing about this. The fans are crazy. Like, I thought that college football fans were like the most cult-like kind of fans. After seeing soccer fans and the way they go about things and their chants and their flag waving, I'm not sure that it comes close. But I had a great time, but we're going to talk some Georgia football today. Here's what we've got going on today's episode of DawgNation at Large. The SEC spring meetings took place this past week. A lot of tough topics were addressed, so we're going to talk about some of those topics and how myself and Connor would go about fixing them. Then we'll do our dog bite segment, and this week it's going to be all the game times that were released earlier today. We'll follow it up with our favorite college football tweets of the week, and then since we didn't get to do it last week, we may have caught Connor by surprise. We're going to do a Connor Kaylee showdown, building our perfect version of the SEC. And let me just say that Connor's had 2 weeks to prepare his argument, so I fully expect him to come out with the win today. But first, let's start with this. So SEC spring meetings took place earlier this week. And before we kind of dive into some of those topics, I actually watched Kirby Smart at the podium twice, Connor. And just the overall vibe that I got from him is that he's just kind of over it. Like very sassy Kirby mode in full effect. These are things that he's had to talk about a lot over the course of the last few months. And I can just get that energy from him that he's just kind of over talking about all of this or is over the way that college football is going.
Yeah, there is a comfort level I think that Kirby Smart speaks with now, in part because he is a two-time national championship winning head coach. I think there's also the fact that, now with Nick Saban, another year removed from his job at Alabama, he is sort of looked at as the lead coach in this conference in terms of who has the biggest voice, who has the biggest authority. Only Mark Stoops has been at his school longer. And so Kirby, through the years, has earned the right, I think, to share his opinions on this matter. And so for him to come out as strongly as he did on the transfer portal the other day, for him to sort of touch on the various issues, one, it speaks to sort of the bass in his voice that has been acquired. But two, I think the desire from the college football media at large to see what Smart has to say about things, because just about everyone agrees that Smart is the game's best head coach at this point in time.
Yeah, and I'm glad you bring up the transfer portal because that's actually the first topic that we'll discuss. I mean, I think he's made it very clear that just one window needs to take place. I mean, two is quite frankly exhausting. I imagine, or I know what it's like for us to be covering it on this side, but when you're a coach and when you're in that program, I can't imagine the drama that goes on behind the scenes, especially when you're trying to run a football team at the same time. So I'm with Kirby Smart in the sense that I think there should be one portal window, but also like just on the broad topic of the transfer portal as well. I think I've spoken about this before on the show when we did our college football commissioner, that there should be a limit to the amount of times that you could transfer as well. I think it should just be one time, with the exception of maybe like a special circumstance if a coach leaves or a position coach leaves. But I'm getting tired of seeing all those graphics, like no offense, JT Daniels or the TJ Finleys of the world, but when you've got 5 schools on a graphic, it's just, that totally defeats the purpose of what it was supposed to be. So as far as the transfer portal goes, I'm with Kirby Smart. Make it one window right after the national championship is played, and then limit the amount of time somebody can transfer, or you have to buy out, or there's just got to be some sort of rule in place to prevent that from happening.
Yeah, I think Kirby hit the nail on the head this week in outlining how the transfer portal should look. In January, like January 3rd through January 13th, I think, you're going to have 4 teams at most playing college football at that point. And, by that January 13th window or that end date, you're going to have just the 2 teams in the national championship game playing left. So you give them the traditional 5 days extension. I know critics out there will point to the academic calendar, but this is college football. It's $1 billion business. We're about to start revenue sharing where each school is going to be able to pay its collective of athletes $20.5 million. Like, this idea that we got to worry and strain about the academic calendar in terms of guys getting 2 places is just so outdated in my mind. And so going ahead, like, I think Kirby did a great job, in my opinion, of outlining some of the concerns that happened with having that April window. And even if it were just a single April or May window, you open up, I think, a can of worms there. Whereas in January, you're going to have a lot of guys that are going to want to move on. And from a coaching standpoint, you know what your team looks like there in January. That way you're able to go through winter workouts. You're able to go through spring practice and figure out what you have in there in that regard without disrupting the sport too much, as it already has been.
Yeah, I think that the big issue with the transfer portal is that it was done with good intentions for the benefit of the players, but now it's just kind of become this big joke. And if you're someone like Kirby Smart at the University of Georgia and you're in a position to where you are in a playoff run deep into the season, the last thing that you want to have to worry about is coaching a playoff team while also having to negotiate contracts and trying to retain some of those players that just want to up and leave. So I thought he made a really strong point about this, stood his ground, and really was the example for all of the other coaches to follow when it came to this topic. Now we'll talk about the college football playoff model. And this is tricky because, I mean, it's changing right in front of our own eyes, too. And it looks like it's going to keep going that way to adjust with the needs or the way that the media or the TV rights people see it. At least for me, like, I think what it comes down to is someone who played softball. Like, I used to study the travel brackets for like the amount of teams that we had and what makes the most sense. And based off of what we saw last year with there only being 12 teams, everybody getting that first round bye, I think you have to up it to a certain amount of teams to where no person gets that bye, because clearly it affected a lot of those teams. The highest number that you could go up to after that would be 16 teams. And I know that people want to make that argument that, like, okay, well, nobody wants to see the 1 seed play the 16 seed. But if you look at last year's final rankings and now you're going just based off how they were ranked and not those that won their conference championship and got that bye, that would have been Oregon playing Clemson, Georgia playing South Carolina. So I understand the argument that nobody wants to see the 1 play the 16, but now with the way that things are changing, some of those matchups might look better than they're going to sound out loud. So I like the idea of doing 16 teams. That way nobody can complain about not having or having that first round bye.
Yeah, I think 16 is the way to go. Like, it's always been headed to this point. I think we saw some of the issues with a 12-team format this year, and the fact that, yes, the teams that got the byes didn't exactly benefit from them. And then when you go to a straight seeding model like they will be doing in this upcoming season, I think of a team like a Notre Dame, who, and I know, Kaylee, this will be near and dear to your heart, they go, 11-1, 12-0, and be one of those top 4 seeds, but also at the same point in time not play in a conference championship game. And so I think by going to 16 teams, I think that solves a lot of issues there. I think you're also going to see them ultimately go to a 5+11 model where you have 5 automatic qualifiers, the 5 highest ranked conference champions, and then the 11 at-large teams are the next 11 highest ranked teams. I know there's been a lot kicked around about the idea of having automatic berths. Well, I would actually be in favor of that because it removes a lot of the subjectivity when it comes to the college football playoff. I ultimately think 5+11 works as well in this regard. And like, if you're the 17th or 18th best team trying to make a case to be in the field, like, you lose a lot of water with me. I know there were a lot of people and a lot of discussion this week has been about Alabama. Don't lose on the road to Vanderbilt. Don't lose on the road to Oklahoma, and you're not trying to find your way to make a case over a one-loss regular season team in SMU to get into the college football playoff.
Well, I will say I thought it was interesting watching it that first time around. One of the things I immediately noticed is how he pointed to other sports like basketball and baseball and softball, who had so many SEC teams, a record number in the postseason basketball tournament and a ton for baseball and softball as well. So, I mean, clearly he's looked into this, and I mean, he's right when it comes to the model of the strength of schedule of other sports. The SEC clearly plays a big role in all of that. So, thought it was interesting that he came with the facts and the receipts to back up his argument there.
Yeah, Kirby Smart.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. I was wrapping up. You got it.
I was just going to say Kirby Smart knows ball, whether it's basketball, softball, or football.
I did. This was not in my rundown, but have you seen the video of him? I guess somebody was like, what's it going to feel like when Texas hoists the trophy this year? And he said, and what sport, basketball or baseball? He was so quick with that. I thought that was really good. But I also thought, like, if this is a Georgia player, like, think Cass Jones with the horns down last year. I mean, it is bad news. So I thought it was funny to see that kind of emotion out of Kirby when we know what would happen if it was the player that were saying something like that.
I think we have a good idea that Kirby's not all that fond of Texas, and I think he relishes the opportunity to beat them. That's why I think last year's SEC championship game means so much to him, and it's why I think he'd kind of like to see the SEC championship stay intact.
Yeah, so we'll talk about conference championships here at the end. Let's go ahead and move on to conference scheduling. I think this is something that you and I see to eye on, as well as all of the SEC coaches. Keep it at 8 games. I mean, clearly strength of schedule didn't matter last year to the College Football Playoff Committee. So why would any SEC coach in their right mind say, yeah, let's move to 9 games so you can have that extra difficult game that, I mean, the outcome at the end may or may not matter. Most likely may not matter. So it's like, why do you want to put your players through an extra week of war when in the long run it's not even going to matter? Plus, I do like the idea of them having some freedom in choosing more selective out of conference games like the Georgia Clemsons last year of the world. So 8-game schedule. I don't know of anybody who's outside, or don't know anyone within the Southeastern Conference that would want to move to 9 games. I feel like this one's the most self-explanatory.
Yeah, the only reason that I could see Georgia and the SEC going to a 9-game conference schedule is to just have uniformity with the other leagues. The Big Ten plays 9 games, the Big 12 plays 9 games, the ACC and the SEC both play 8. But I think as Kirby Smart outlined this week, some might say, oh, you remove the big-time non-conference games. Well, I think we saw last year that Georgia was so strong against ACC foes, Clemson and Georgia Tech, that helps establish the SEC as a premier league, and so you want to have that. Let's also keep in mind, like, let's say that Georgia wanted to have the Clemson and Georgia Tech games on there, and you remove, say, a UMass or a lesser game, which is, I think, a pro-fan move. Mm-hmm. Georgia's schedule gets a whole lot tougher. And look, that was a very beat-up team last year. Imagine swapping out that late game against UMass for, say, a Texas A&M or an Oklahoma or an LSU. I do think that starts to add up and starts to weigh on teams because, like, there was an obvious schedule imbalance last year with the way that some league schedules set up. And more often than not, I think by adding another SEC game where you are getting teams to compete on a level field, while it makes for a more exciting television product, it hurts your conference, I think, ultimately in terms of the teams that they're going to be able to get in. You think of that late season game against Oklahoma where Alabama had to go on the road. If that's, if that's a Mississippi State or a lesser program that they're traditionally used to playing, I think that helps Alabama's case a whole lot more so than necessarily the strength of schedule benefit that comes from potentially a 9th game.
So this next one, I think this was the hardest for me to look at because I feel like when it comes to roster limits, I'm looking at it through the Georgia glasses. As someone who grew up watching Georgia football and has seen the success of so many walk-ons throughout the program and them just being a very fundamental part of Georgia history, especially in recent years, it's hard to say that I wouldn't want to, I would want to limit the roster. Now, I don't know how many teams outside of Georgia or how many fan bases outside of Georgia would care about that. But when you see stories like Stetson Bennett and Dan Jackson, it's like, why would I want to limit those roster spots?
Yeah, and ultimately, this is something that I think is near and dear to Kirby's heart, and
Mm-hmm.
understandably so, because Georgia has, I think, a great walk-on culture, and not every program does. But when you're the premier program in this state like Georgia is, you're going to be able to attract a lot of guys who just want to play for their home state school, go out there and make a difference. You see it, Dan Jackson, Stetson Bennett similarly came to Georgia first as a walk-on. So in going to 105 scholarships, yes, it's great that all those guys are going to be able to get on scholarship and have that paid for. And roster limits does, I think, open things up for other sports in that regard. But when it comes to Georgia football in particular, a program that has a proud walk-on tradition, and Georgia's not the only one in that regard. I think Arkansas, Oklahoma, a lot of other ones do. Texas comes to mind there, but it's not for everyone. And unfortunately, as Kirby touched on this week, well, it's a good thing that they're grandfathering in those that are already walk-ons for this program. That way they won't just straight up lose their spot. You think of those guys who are in 7th, 8th, ninth grade right now who potentially would be walk-ons and continue to grow and develop as football players that are now just not going to get the chance to do that at the University of Georgia.
So this last one's a little bit controversial, especially over last season when it came to conference championships. A lot of people had a lot of things to say about the way that things were going and what this game would go on to mean, whether it would help a team or hurt a team. You see how much the SEC championship means to Georgia players, means to Kirby Smart. I think a lot of people are overlooking the fact that, yes, Georgia did beat Texas in the SEC championship last year. And yes, Georgia may have lost Carson Beck because of what happened in the SEC championship, but I think that you keep it. It's tradition. And I think about people like Trevor Etienne, who specifically talked about what it meant for him to win an SEC championship, and he didn't want anyone to devalue that because they didn't do as well in the playoffs as other people had thought. And I also think about whenever I went to the Combine and you hear players like Michael and Malachi talk about how much the SEC championship meant to them, and then you hear the Eagles players that Cody interviewed talked about how, yeah, the SEC championship was more difficult than the national championship. So I think from my eyes and also a Georgia perspective, I think it's really important to keep the SEC championship.
Yeah, it still matters a lot to Georgia. And look, maybe this is because of the proximity to Atlanta, but, banners fly forever. And as much as last season was a struggle for that Georgia team, winning the SEC the first year that it expanded, that's something they're going to be able to say forever. And I think as we get further and further away from that 2024 team, it'll be something that I think these guys are able to look back on positively and recognize it for the accomplishment that it is. And does it matter as much in a playoff era? Probably not. And I think that's one of the real casualties there of the sport. But if the alternative, is the theoretical, all right, so there are 4 automatic qualifiers, the top 2 teams in the SEC advance to the playoff, and the number 3 team plays the number 6 team, and the number 4 team plays the number 5 team. Well, I think that helps for the college football playoff. The SEC championship game means a lot. And we talk so much about playoff expansion and what that might do to the sport and how it might impact the regular season. This is one of those games that you dream about, that you want to see elite teams play. And last year we got that. It was an absolute classic in Georgia and in Texas. That Gunnar Stockton hit is going to live on for the rest of Georgia's time. You're going to see that at Sanford Stadium this year. And the memories that are associated with winning that game, I think, are so great that this is something. Well, yes, Georgia has a monopoly, it seems, in that regard in terms of getting to the game. They've made it to 4 straight conference championship games. I think as other programs get there, they're going to recognize the accomplishment that it is in terms of getting to the SEC championship and winning it, even if the college football playoff is ultimately the bigger goal in the eyes of fans.
So here's the thing is that right now, these are all the hottest topics in college football. And while, yes, a lot of them were touched on during the SEC spring meetings, SEC Media Days is right around the corner. We're going to blink, it's going to be here, and then we're going to have to listen to coaches talk about this all over again. I'm curious to see how Kirby Smart's going to address his opening statement, especially with this role that he's taken on now with all of the SEC coaches. So just go ahead and be thinking about that, guys. We've got SEC Media Days coming up, and we'll hear all about this all over again. In just a minute, Connor and I will go over the game times that were released today. Finally got some new Georgia football news. But first, we want to remind you that here on DawgNation at Large, we are so excited to partner with Zagoria Law Firm. And what we love about Zagoria Law Firm is that they're the only law firm in the state that specializes in representing people who have been bitten by dogs, as well as those who have been knocked down by dogs. We also love that it's easily accessible for anyone in the state, whether you live in Dalton or Valdosta. You can reach out to Zagoria Law Firm. They're the official dog bite injury lawyers of the Georgia Bulldogs. So if you or a loved one has been hurt by someone else's dog, give them a call at 833-GA-DOG-BITE. That's DOGBITE, or visit ZagoriaLaw.com. Now let's do dog bites. So game times were dropped today. I did my own emojis. They're not the best, not as great as Cody. I tried. Did we have any idea that this was happening today, or did this just was it just like a bomb drop?
Traditionally, it is the Thursday of SEC spring meetings, or when these take place, is you usually get the first 3 games. With them making, I think, Georgia-Florida somewhat of a protected game. The last couple of years, they've announced that as a 3:30 game. And then the Georgia Tech game, because it is being played on a Friday this year, I think that's why they went ahead and were able to announce that as the game time for that time.
All right, well, let's go ahead and start talking about some of these game times. I mean, I'll just go ahead and let you know off the top, every single game time is the same. They're all going to be 3:30 games. For Marshall opening kickoff, I don't hate that. I didn't think it was going to be the night game, but I also wasn't too sure it was going to be the noon game. I feel like considering who the opponent is, and of course it's Georgia football, I think 3:30 is right on the mark.
It's perfect. It might be a little hot because this game is going to be played August 30th, but all things considered, I think this is a win, because what it does allow you to do if you're a Georgia fan, allows you to lock in on Georgia, watch Gunnar Stockton in what will be his first career home start in Sanford Stadium, but you're able to watch the other games that are taking place in that prime time window. And I think the first week of the season, you have a lot of great games. And now there are going to be great games on Thursday, great games on Sunday as well there. Carson Beck plays Notre Dame that Sunday. I'm sure a lot of Georgia fans will be watching that. But with this first game being at 3:30, I think you take that. You're not in a big rush to wake up early and get in the stadium. You'll be able to get a little bit of tailgating in. And it'll be a nice dip your toes into the water, so to speak, over Labor Day weekend when Georgia takes on Marshall.
I totally forgot that we were so spoiled last year having that first game in Mercedes-Benz, being in a climate-controlled area. That first game at 3:30 is going to be brutal, so bring your little mini fans. Okay, next is Austin Peay 3:30. I was actually kind of surprised by this one. I felt like this was, if Georgia was going to have a noon kickoff game on the schedule, I figured it would be this one. But, I mean, as someone who absolutely despises a noon game, I'm not going to complain about this.
Yeah, I think Georgia fans are pretty happy that you get Marshall and Austin Peay, 2 subpar opponents in terms of prestige, being at 3:30. Important to note about this game, it is going to air on SEC Network Plus or ESPN Plus, meaning it won't be on traditional TV. We're going to have you set up for how to stream it and how to watch the Dogs that day, because I think there's still going to be a ton of interest in that point, where before Georgia goes on the road that next week against Tennessee, which we'll get to here in a bit, I think every rep for Gunnar Stockton matters in that game, especially for a young team. Those games are going to be super critical, more so than perhaps would be in the past, given Georgia has been such a veteran-laden team.
All right, so now for another one that kind of came as a surprise to a lot of people. That's going to be Georgia and Tennessee, Georgia's first SEC game, which is also on the road at Tennessee, also going to take place at 3:30. They give Florida and LSU the night game. I think I could almost make the case that if Nico was still the quarterback at Tennessee, that there would have been a stronger argument for Georgia and Tennessee to have that 7:30 game.
Yeah, if Nico's at Tennessee, there's no doubt in my mind that this game is being played at 7:30. These two teams were in the college football playoff a season ago, whereas LSU and Florida were 8 and 9 win teams. I know there's a lot of excitement about DJ Lagway versus Garrett Nussmeier, but this Georgia-Tennessee, if we're going to call it a rivalry, it really hasn't been. These two teams haven't been competitive, especially since Josh Heupel has become the head coach there at Tennessee. I think this game offers Georgia a chance to make a very notable statement there. And yes, it's a Tennessee team that I don't think people view as highly following Nico's transfer to UCLA, but it's a chance to come out here and say, hey, look, we know Tennessee is a program that has been trending in the right direction for a few years now. we're still a better team and a better program than them. And even with a first-time quarterback making his first career road start, should that be the case with Gunner starting that day, I think that's going to say a lot about what this team can ultimately potentially do, because I think this is a team that, while very young, it is a team that can get better over the course of the season. And if you're able to win a game like this on the road, I think that's going to help tremendously over the course of the year.
I think, too, just from like an SEC/college football perspective, this is also going to give you a way better insight into what type of team Tennessee is also going to be, especially with their quarterback situation. So I feel like there's going to be a lot of interest just from college football fans in general on what this game will hold. When it comes to Georgia, Florida, I mean, you knew it was getting served up to you. 3:30, it's the standard. It's perfect. 12 o'clock doesn't give Georgia, Florida fans enough time to drink. 7:30 kickoff gives them way too much time to drink. So 3:30, I mean, that's the standard time. Like, it couldn't be anything else.
Keep this game at 3:30. It is a tradition. This is going to be the last year for a while that this game is played in Jacksonville. The next 2 years after this goes to Atlanta and Tampa. So I like for at least this year to keep this at 3:30, play this game at 3:30 as always. I'll be interested to see moving forward what that looks like. There's going to be a lot of eyes on Florida this year. Do they make a leap with DJ Lagway full-time as their starting quarterback? Now they went 6-1 last year in games that he started, and the one loss came against the Georgia Bulldogs where he left in the first half there. But I think that this is a game. This could go a long way in shaping how Georgia finishes out the year, because you get through that October slate where you do have to go on the road to Auburn. You host Ole Miss. If you're able to win this game, you got Mississippi State and then Texas at home to wrap up SEC play. And if Georgia's going to make it back to the SEC championship game in Atlanta like we just talked about, they're going to have to find a way to beat a Florida team that really, really wants to win this game if they have not yet under Billy Napier.
Speaking of finishing up the season, the time was released for Georgia's final game of the regular season, Georgia versus Georgia Tech, on Black Friday again, but this time taking place at 3:30. I hate it. Personally, I hate this because if you know, I know that you're going to have mixed feelings about this, but if you do Thanksgiving right, you should still be in a food coma around this time. This is when that prime time nap slot is. I mean, I know you weren't a fan of the night game last year, but I do appreciate that it gave myself, and I think Georgia fans could also agree, more time to, I guess, because I go home for Thanksgiving, spend with my family on that Friday morning. So I'm not a huge fan of the 3:30. I am a bit biased because I do live here in Atlanta, so it does make it easier because this is going to be a neutral site game. But I mean, at this point, if it's going to be on Black Friday, I think I would rather have it at night. But I do understand why they would make Texas and Texas A&M that night game.
Kaylee, when they played this game last year on a Friday night, it started on a Friday night and it ended on a Saturday morning.
And it was such an electric game.
For that reason alone, we can't have that happen again. I don't know if the Georgia fan base is going to be able to get through another 8 overtime game. I'm excited about this game. I'll be interested to see what the environment is like. And look, let's just be honest, when it's played at Tech, it is just not the same thing. A lot of Georgia fans take that over. I think with this game being played in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, it's probably going to be even more sterile of an environment. This might be one of the only times that the building is not sold out when Georgia is playing in it. But I'm interested to see what this does to the rivalry, because I think it's undeniable that since Brent Key has taken over as Georgia Tech's head coach, that they have made strides in terms of getting closer to Georgia, at least when they play on the field in this game. They very nearly and probably should have won that game a year ago. And I think they know, hey, we've got a chance to beat them in a building, Mercedes-Benz Stadium, where they have a lot of success. And that's going to mean a whole lot to that Georgia Tech program.
I will say that we have had some weird weather games with Georgia and Georgia Tech over the last 2 years, so maybe it is nice that it is going to be in a climate-controlled type place. That's going to wrap up Dog Bites. Before we do Meme Machine, do want to say that we are at that point in the year where kids are out of school and back home, and your schedule may look a little bit crazy. And even if you can't join us here on Thursdays at 7 o'clock, or you just have a more difficult time tuning into any of our live shows, you can always listen to us on the DawgNation podcast feed, whether it's here like DawgNation at Large or Before the Hedges or On the Beat. Sometimes it's just a little bit easier to listen while you're in the car or cleaning your home. So there is always that option to listen to us in podcast format, and you can do that by visiting our DawgNation podcast feed. With that, we'll go ahead and bring Cody Chapins in for Meme Machine.
Who's that coming down the track? Who's that coming down the track? It's a Meme Machine and Red Black. It's a Meme Machine and Red Black. No, 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 no.
There's that smiling face.
All right.
Cody and I have. Cody could also be the good luck charm for Atlanta United because he has also been at the same 2 games that I've been to. So I don't want to take all the credit because there's a good chance it could be Cody too.
I've watched a lot of losses from that team as well this year, so let's not jinx them.
All right, so I'll kick off Meme Machine this week. You can totally tell when I have a busy week or when I don't because this week I was really, really busy. I'd only liked like 3 or 4 tweets, so I had to dig into the archives for this. But now that I've also been hosting Before the Hedges and talking about recruiting and numbers all the time, I agree with, I think it's Tim Burkett on Twitter, who says, I liked college sports better when they paid the athletes under the table and not through NIL because all this stuff is just very mind-boggling to me, especially now seeing that some schools are paying athletes like 6 figures to even commit to them. Like, that's just insane. So maybe we didn't appreciate it enough when they were just paying kids under the table.
Look, I'll be interested in seeing post revenue sharing whenever that ultimately gets signed into stuff and finalized. Maybe we start to see that go back a little bit and it's not as upfront and just big money that is being thrown around. Because I think as Kirby Smart touched on this week, there are a lot of people frustrated by the way things are going.
Wasn't it so fun when we just used to wonder, how did that kid afford that car? And we just got to wonder that, right?
Yeah.
Right.
All right, so for my Meme Machine, I went with the funniest thing I saw all week. And I think the funniest thing any of us saw all week was, Summer Ice from Georgia Tech handed out rings to their players.
Top 10 win.
Because they went 7-6, and they have like the side of it says the Birmingham Bowl, which they lost to Vanderbilt, and they're really hyping up their top 10 win over FSU, who we know FSU what they were last year. So it was the funniest thing I saw all week. Georgia Tech handing out rings to everybody for, I guess, being okay at home last year.
It's giving the person that drives the Cybertruck, just for show because it's funsies.
It's one of those things. I don't mind them giving them to the players, but I probably wouldn't have tweeted it out.
Yeah.
Tweeted it out and tweeted about it. You don't got to tweet everything. You don't got to post everything online.
Yeah, the way Brent Key comes off is like such a blue collar, hard nosed, tough guy. This seems like totally a Jeff Collins move and not a Brent Key move. So
derogatory.
All right, what you got, Connor?
Yeah, Kirby Smart in the game. We learned this week College Football 26 is coming out July 10th. Kirby Smart on the cover of the deluxe edition. And more than that, he's actually going to be in the college football video game. I wouldn't advise that you go there and coach as Georgia right away. That takes away some of the fun that I like to build up a lesser program. But, eventually you work your way to Georgia there. I would note that there were a number of people out there discussing that now that since there will be coordinators in this game as well, over 300 total coaches in the game. There are a lot of Georgia fans out there making the joke the first thing they're going to do is fire Mike Bobo. That may have played a little bit better for some audiences, but here we like to just honor head coach Kirby Smart on the cover of the game this year.
Question, really quick. So do you pick a new team to rebuild every year, or do you just stick with the one that you initially chose? How does that work in boy math?
Not every year. Sometimes I bounce around, usually 5-6 seasons, want a new challenge, want to build up something else and sort of see how things go. Playing different games, different environments, different uniforms, things like that. You never want to stay at one program for too long, at least in my opinion.
So will Kirby, on the sideline, be as animated as he normally is, and will they have a get-back coach? Those are my questions about the game.
No chance a video game can capture how animated Kirby Smart is. I mean, we've all seen the vertical he had on the Kaylee Ringo pick six. That can't be conditioned into a video game.
Guys. That's my best Kirby Smart.
Please give me a warning before you do that next time. I really heard every single bit of that. Okay, so last week we hit Connor with a little surprise, but I'm nice. I have a heart, so I told him that we could just push back what was supposed to be our segment last week to this week. So Connor and I are going to build our perfect version of the SEC with a Connor Kaylee showdown.
It's time for the Connor Kaylee Showdown.
We literally had to blow the dust off of that open. We
Yeah,
hadn't used it in
for
a while.
real. I got a cowboy hat 2 weeks ago in Nashville. I should have brought it. spent some good money on it. But this topic kind of works for this week because the whole idea stemmed from when everybody was joking about that Tennessee was going to get kicked out of the SEC. And then we were talking about SEC spring meeting stuff. So I feel like this is just kind of the perfect time for us to talk about this. I will say I think that Connor's going to pull this one out of the bag today because my argument is very short, sweet, and to the point. But we'll let Cody toss the coin to see who goes first.
Yeah, so first off, we're just trying to build our perfect SEC is the mission that each of you will have, correct?
Yes.
All right, so we've changed studios, and I've lost my coin, so we're going to flip a DawgNation Go Dogs button.
I got one in my purse.
So we'll call the Go Dogs the heads and the other side the tails. Kaylee, are you calling this?
Sure, give me tails.
It is heads. So Connor, would you like to kick or receive here?
I would like to receive and defer to the second half.
Okay, so Kaylee, you were up first. Make your argument for the perfect SEC.
That's fine. I don't need that much time on the shot clock. I was one of those children that took a lot of pride in knowing my U.S. map. My dad used to test me on capitals, and I loved geography class. So I'm very adamant that the Southeast needs to say the Southeast in terms of the actual region of the Southeast itself. So that being said, there are 3 teams that you can automatically eliminate that do not count as the Southeast, those being Texas and Oklahoma. Go ahead and punt those back over to the other side of the country. And let me just say, going to Missouri a couple weeks ago made me realize Missouri is 100% not the Southeast. If it takes like 16 hours to drive there from Atlanta, it is not considered the Southeast. But because you eliminate those 3 teams, now you have an odd number of teams within the SEC, which just doesn't make the format work. I think that the other team you have to get rid of to make it even, because I'm not adding any teams into the SEC. I'm only taking away. I'm getting rid of Vanderbilt, and not for the reasons that everybody says you should get rid of Vanderbilt, that, oh, they're not that good and their academic standards are too high. I saw the SEC softball tournament bracket, and I was really confused because there was only 15 teams. The only SEC team that doesn't have a softball team is Vanderbilt. Therefore, they need to be the one that's out. If you can't have a softball team when all of the other teams do, you're getting the boot. So my perfect version of the SEC, we're getting rid of the teams that are actually outside the southeastern region of the United States, plus one that had to go by process of elimination. So that's my perfect SEC. Boom.
All right. Good stuff right there. Connor, it is your time to give us the perfect Southeastern Conference.
I actually largely agree with Kaylee. However, there is one bit of inconsistency. I don't understand why she has Texas leaving the SEC and Texas A&M getting to stay.
That's fine.
They're just as far away. I would keep Vanderbilt. They've been a long-standing member in this league. I would get rid of Texas A&M, Oklahoma, and Missouri. Go back to a 12-team league like it was prior to the 2012 season. I would have 2 6-team conferences, East versus West, as it is intended. And to always be that way. I would play 8 conference games. I would maybe rotate it a little bit where you have 3 protected rivalries. So for Georgia, it would be Florida, it would be Auburn. And I will say it'll be Tennessee, and you figure out the rest from there, and you rotate around to play more teams rather than just playing East and West. I think you still have the value of winning the SEC East and winning the SEC West. You meet in Atlanta, the winner of the SEC championship, the biggest and best conference in college football. You get rid of those interlopers who, quite frankly, as Kaylee points out, aren't South or aren't East. And I keep Vanderbilt, a team that is farther East than Texas A&M, farther South.
All right, good stuff there.
Yeah, I will say College Station is closer to the Southeast than Austin is, if that makes sense. Like, if you look at it on a map, College Station is more East Texas than Austin is. Now, there was a scenario, I almost went like full crazy mode on this where I basically made Florida its own conference, but then I just thought that would be a little bit too much for the Connor Kaylee showdown. But there was a world where I almost made Florida its own conference and then used that map where it's like if all the regions in the US were to go to war, like who would win. I was almost going to base it off of that, but then it just, like I said, it just got too complicated.
It's interesting to me that you two are very young people, but you just both want to go back in my day and that 12-team SEC, that's when it was the best SEC. Nobody wants to adapt and make it bigger, which I think a lot of college football fans, I think we're sick of like these super conferences, and this thought of there only being 2 conferences just kind of turns everybody off except for the folks making all the money off of it. So interesting stuff there from both of you. I will say, because we kind of tricked Connor last week, he's talking rivalries that he wanted to have in there, adding teams and subtracting teams. So it is taking a lead, because this was all tied 5-5 when we started, but Connor Riley, yeah, he is going to move 6-5. He is the winner of today's Connor Kaylee Showdown.
I can accept that.
All right, guys, take us home.
So, Kaylee, since you don't want Vanderbilt to be a part of the SEC, when Georgia next plays at Vanderbilt, are you just going to skip that trip to Nashville and not have that be a part of it, since you don't want to recognize them as an SEC program?
This is hypothetical, Connor. It's a show. It's a show. It's not actually real life. This was just the discussion that we were having.
Kaylee doesn't want Nashville to be a part of the SEC. That's tough. That is about as southeastern as you get in terms of cities in this league.
I think I was just really appalled by them not having a softball team. Like, you have what's been a really great baseball team historically. It's like, is it Title IX? Title IX, where you have to have like the even and the balance. I don't know. I think I was just really shocked to see that. Okay, so usually I end the show by asking you what you learned, and we talked a little bit about this before the show, but if you've made it this far, it's because, you've stuck around and you're loyal to the show. We've talked about White Lotus a lot on this show before. Connor and I are both big fans of the show Survivor as well as White Lotus, and the director and creator of White Lotus, Mike White, is actually going to be on the 50th season of Survivor, which is going to bring back some fan favorites from the past. Where do we think that Mike White falls in the ultimate rankings of Survivor? Does he get out early? Does he stay to the end? Like, what are your thoughts?
I thought when Mike White first played on David vs. Goliath, he played a great season. And in my opinion, he should have won. The reason he did not, I think pretty clearly they knew that he was well off from his time in Hollywood. And they elected not to vote for him and give him the $1 million, ultimately voting for Nick Wilson, who I thought was just a substandard player.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see how he does in this game. Obviously, I think being Mike White, who his celebrity has just blown up since then, has put a much bigger target on his back. But he might also be someone you want to sit with next to at the end of the game, knowing that he might not garner a lot of votes from people out there because of what the money would potentially not mean.
Yeah, I think he's a low threat level player. One of my all-time favorite Survivor scenes is when he wins like the challenge where he gets a little bit of wine in him. But I will say he has featured Survivor cast members from his season on every season of the White Lotus. So, I mean, if I'm one of the people there, like, I may be sticking around Mike White in hopes that I'll get to be on a season of White Lotus. So thought that was really cool that two of the things in pop culture that really matter to us, they are intertwining. So that's going to wrap up today's episode of DawgNation at Large. I'm Kaylee Mansell with Connor Riley. We'll see you right back here next Thursday.